So in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void. Now this intrigues me, because the Hebrew phrase here, jot it down, this phrase, without form and void, is tohu va bohu. And you're saying, so what? Listen, the phrase is an important one. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And suddenly, the earth was without form and void. Tohu va bohu. Now, in Isaiah, jot it down, read it later, chapter 45, verse 18. Listen. For thus saith the Lord that created the heavens, God himself that formed the earth. He hath established it. He created it not in vain. Or tohu va bohu is the literal Hebrew phrase. God, who created the heaven, who formed the earth, he says he did not create it tohu va bohu. Same exact Hebrew phrase. So then I think, well, wait a minute. If Isaiah 45:18 says that God did not create it without form and void, but Genesis 1:2 says the earth was without form and void, tohu va bohu, what's going on here? I believe what's going on here is this. God created the heaven and the earth became wiped out. It became without form. It became void. Because, you see, I believe it was at this time that an event took place. It's described in Isaiah chapter 14, in Ezekiel chapter 28, and that is there was an archangel in heaven by the name of Lucifer, who launched a rebellion against God in heaven, was kicked out of heaven, and came to earth, where he is now called the God of this world. So he's kicked out of heaven along with 1/3 of the angels who followed him in his dumb rebellion. And they came to the earth. The earth was impacted hugely. Suddenly, if you would, hell hits earth, in a sense. And the earth that was created, Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth, but now the earth suddenly becomes without form. It becomes void. It is wiped out. And I believe personally, I have a strong personal conviction. Others may not agree. And everybody has the right to be wrong. But I do believe that this explains so much. God did not create the world that way initially, but it becomes that way in verse 2, you see. And it could very well be, that is when Lucifer is now cast out of heaven, becomes Satan, becomes the devil, and hits the earth where he is the God of this world. And now the world becomes a showdown, a battleground between God and between the rebel, Satan. So what does God do? The earth, without form and void, darkness was upon the face of the deep. But the Spirit of God, I like this, verse 2, the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. God always is coming in on something that's been messed up by the enemy. I like that. God is always coming in on something that was messed up by the enemy. And here the world is a mess. It's without form and void. That means it's wiped out. It's wasted, we would say today. It's wasted. And God begins to move. And God said, verse 3, let there be light. Or literally in the Hebrew, light be. And light was. So what's happening now in this story? We're seeing the recreation of planet Earth. Well, you say, then, John, if you're suggesting that there was an original creation and it became without form and void, and now the rest of the story is the recreation, then what was that original creation consisting of? Beats me. Don't know. We could speculate, but God has not seen fit to tell us, evidently. So I just sort of leave it there. But now we see the recreation, and it begins with God declaring, "Let there be light," and there was light, and God saw, verse 4, the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness, and God called the light day, and the darkness night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. By the way, notice the phraseology. The evening and the morning were the first day. The evening and the morning were the second day. The evening and the morning were the third day. That's still the way the Jewish people reckon their time, their days. It starts in the evening. It goes from darkness to morning. It goes from darkness to light till the next evening. I like that. We start our day in the morning, if you would. We go from morning to evening. We start out, it's a happy morning, and it ends up dark, and we're weary. I like the Hebrew way of reckoning time a whole lot better. They still do to this day, the Jewish people. They reckon their days from evening, starts dark, and then gets brighter and lighter, you see. It goes from darkness to light. I like that. So the evening and the morning were the first day. Now, please note this. Because in these verses, in these first 5 verses, folks, I now understand. I now get what Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 5 when he says, "If any man be in Christ, he is a new creation. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things become new." And I say, hey, this describes that. Genesis 1 through 5 describes that. What do you mean? In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth became without form and void, wiped out. And the Spirit of God began to move upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God divided the darkness from the light, and He saw it was good. That's your story. That's the story of you being a new creation. 2 Corinthians 5. What do you mean? We were created in God's image. And then we were what? Wiped out. We became without form and void. Sin wiped you out. You were dead in sin. Wiped out because of sin. God made you in His image originally. But we became wiped out because of our own sin and depravity. We were in the dark, man. But the Spirit of God does what? The Spirit of God moves. We didn't seek Him. There is none that seeks God, no, not one, the Bible says. He just moved in to you. He moved in on me with His kindness and grace and mercy according to His sovereign will. He moves, the Spirit of God moves in upon the face of the waters. Now you know, you that have studied the Word, that water is a symbol, a type of the Scriptures. Now you are clean through the Word which I've spoken to you, Jesus said. Ephesians 5 says, we are washed by the water which is the Word of God. Are you with me? In Bible typology, water is a symbol of the Word. So watch this. The Spirit of God moves. How does He move? Upon the face of the water. Suddenly, you're hearing a Bible study. You listen to a radio show on K-Apple, or you see a TV program, or you talk to a buddy, whatever it might be, and somebody begins to share with you the Word, and the Spirit of God begins to move. You're wiped out. There's a voidness. There's an emptiness in your heart. There's a blackness in your life. But suddenly, the Spirit of God begins to move upon the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light. And you go, oh, I get it. I see it. And the light goes on. And you're born again. And then God separates the darkness from the light. And good things begin to happen. This is a picture, not just of creation physically, but of what happens in your life and in my life according to God's sovereign grace and mercy. It's perfect. I love it. Well, verse 6. God said, and let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters. Let there be an expanse, a sky in the middle of the waters. And let this sky, this atmosphere, this firmament, this expanse, let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. And that should not be capitalized as it may be in your King James Version. He just called it heaven. Heaven refers in the Bible to both the atmosphere around us, the stars over us, and the destiny that's awaiting us, the place that will be when we leave this earth, you see. He calls this expanse heaven, or we could say atmosphere. Interesting. And the evening and the morning were the second day. Now think with me. This is fascinating to me. What's being talked about is this. When God recreated the world, you have the globe here, the earth here, okay? Then you have the atmosphere, the firmament, the heaven. And then above the atmosphere, you have water. Because the atmosphere separates water from water. God makes that clear here when he says, let there be, verse 6, a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the water from the water. So you have water on the earth, and then you have sky, and then you have water that's around the atmosphere. Which means that the earth, having a water canopy around its atmosphere, would be a great big greenhouse. It means the whole world would be of uniform temperature. It means that things wouldn't get wiped out by the ultraviolet rays. It's SP40, this water canopy. It's a great big nose coat. Sunscreen. But it would provide the world to have uniform temperature, and the whole earth would be like a great big Maui. Now, this is what happened, I believe, when the flood came. The water canopy collapses and deluges the earth. The water canopy comes down, and the earth suddenly changes radically, and men are no longer living like they once did, long days, as we shall talk about shortly in Genesis 5. But lifespan goes down. Cataclysmic changes take place. All kinds of atmospheric and environmental and ecological changes immediately happen because of the collapsing of the water canopy that once kept the whole world tropical. Now, if that be true, we would expect to find remnants or fossils of tropical vegetation in Antarctica or in the Arctic Circle. And guess what? We do. We do. Science agrees that at one point, those areas, the whole world was in a tropical condition. And here God gives, I believe, a very wonderful and simple explanation. There was a water canopy. And then in the flood, because of man's sin, we'll talk about that story in about 10 minutes when we get to Genesis 8, 9, and 10. But the water canopy collapses, see, and that causes the flood. God said, verse 9, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land also appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth. And the gathering together of the waters called he seas. God saw that it was good. Whenever I see seas, I think it's good too. Seas candy. God called the water area now seas, and the dry land he called earth. And God said, verse 11, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the third day. Hey, now we see life appearing. Day one, there's light, darkness, day and night. Day two, there's this firmament being formed, atmosphere. Day three, life appears. Life appears. Why the third day? Why does the fruit appear? Why does life come on day three? Because Jesus Christ, folks, is the first fruit, who rose again from the dead on the what? Third day. Very simple. He rose again from the third day. He is the first fruit. We have life because of what took place on day three in his resurrection story. The third day, life appears. God said, verse 14, let there be lights now in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night. And let them be for signs and for seasons, for days and for years. Let them be for lights in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. Verse 16, God made two great lights. The greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good, and the evening and the morning were the fourth day. In that fourth day, God makes the sun and the moon, the greater light and the lesser light. I was in Seattle on Tuesday, and I was doing a radio talk show up there, and somebody called in and said to me, John, didn't Jesus teach us that we are gods? And I said, what do you mean? He said, tell me, John, didn't Jesus say that he is the light of the world? I said, yeah. And tell me this, didn't Jesus also declare that we are the light of the world? Yeah. Well, if he's the light and we're the light, then we're all the same light. Therefore, we must be gods. And I said, sorry, not so, not true. Here's the deal. Now listen carefully. Jesus is the light. He also said we are to be lights. But he is the light inherently. We are reflectors of the light, you see. He is the sun. Not just the S-O-N, but in the analogy, he is the S-U-N. We are the lesser light. We're the moon that shines in the dark society that we live in. Shining our own light? No. What do? We reflect his light. Just like the moon at night. That's you. That's me. We're like the moon, you see. And what we do is we reflect his light. We don't have light. We just reflect his light. And it is a sign in the night, in the dark culture in which we live. We reflect His light. But wait a minute. I was in East Jerusalem with Tammy a couple of weeks ago. And we were there looking up at the stars, and we saw something interesting. We watched the moon suddenly get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. It was an eclipse. What is an eclipse? Simply this. You have the sun shining on the moon, the sun that is light, the moon that reflects light, and then what do you see? The world. The world gets between the sun and the moon and eclipses it. And to whatever extent the world gets between the sun and the moon will diminish the light that reflects from the moon. The same thing is true with me, with you. He's the sun, yeah, and we're the moon. But wait a minute. To whatever degree I allow the world to come in will diminish that light proportionately. Let me ask you this. If you were going to chart your own life tonight, would you be a full moon? Or a three-quarter moon? Half moon? Quarter moon? Sliver moon? Eclipsed moon? See, it all depends on how much of the world that you allow to creep in and come between you and the sun. In any given day, how much of the world will I allow come between me and the sun, Jesus Christ? That is going to be to the degree that I will be eclipsed. Or, if I don't allow the world to come in between me and Jesus, I can shine. I want you guys to be moonies. Not moonies in that way, but moonies. To be moon people. To be, you know what I'm saying. To be full moons. Not to moon people. I didn't say that. I did not say that. I said to shine. To shine brightly. Oh, man. By not allowing the world to get between you and the sun. I better move on here quickly. And so there was a great light, the sun, and a lesser light, the moon. And the lesser light was there to shine in the night, reflecting the light of the greater light, the sun. And God said, verse 20, "Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the firmament of heaven." And God created whales, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful, multiply, fill the waters in the seas, and let the fowl multiply in the earth." And the evening and the morning were the fifth day. And God said, verse 24, "Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping things, and beast of the earth after his kind." And it was so. God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing after its kind. And God saw that it was good. Notice this. This deals a death blow to theistic evolution. That is the idea that God sort of started the process up and then let the species evolve one into another. The language here in the Hebrew is emphatic. After their kind, after his kind, after its kind. In other words, there can be changes within a species, but not changes from one species to another species. After their kind, after his kind, after its kind. And God is declaring here very emphatically that what happens here is animals, species, stay within the species category that they are in. You can have mutations within species, but not transmutations from species to a different species. You can do all kinds of stuff with dogs. You can breed them and crossbreed them, And you can get all kinds of interesting sizes and colors and shapes and characters, but you're always going to have a dog. You're never going to get a cat. You'll never get a cat crossbreeding dogs. You can get all kinds of changes within the dog species, but you're never going to get a cat. Impossible. Well, yeah, but given enough time. Really? Did you know scientists have been able to breed fruit flies? These guys, anybody have fruit flies in their houses ever? It's amazing. Fruit flies multiply with great rapidity. And scientists have been able to breed fruit flies into millions of generations. Millions of generations. And guess what? They're still fruit flies. Millions of generations have passed, and never does one suddenly pop out and be a honeybee or a hummingbird. You can do all kinds of stuff. And scientists have done this, and I have a book on that. The experiments with fruit flies, trying to prove that if you can get enough generations, millions of generations, there will be eventually the transmutation. There'll be a change, and yet it doesn't happen. There's changes within the fruit fly species, but you still have fruit flies, and they've done millions and millions of generations, and they still have fruit flies. By the way, when you talk about time, here's something for you to think about, to put in your craw. See, time is the name of the game for the evolutionist. It requires great amounts of time, billions and billions of years. But did you realize there's some huge problems with that? The sun loses 1,200,000 tons of mass every second. The sun loses 1,200,000 tons of mass per second. Every second. Boom, 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 boom. 1,200,000 tons each second. The evolutionist would say to us that evolution, by its very nature, requires billions and billions and billions of years to produce life on Earth. Well, that means you have to go back billions and billions of years to give the amount of time necessary to evolve life on Earth. So you have to add those tons of mass to the sun. 1,200,000 tons of mass every second. For billions and billions. Now we're talking huge sun. Not only huge in size, but hot. Close proximity to Earth. So close would be its proximity, and so hot would be its temperature, that everything and anything would fry immediately on the surface of the Earth. In other words, if you go back billions of years and give all this time needed for evolution, it can't work by virtue of the fact of what astronomers tell us about the sun itself. Well, whether you're talking about the sun or fruit flies, it just doesn't work. And God here says clearly, He says every species is going to be after its own kind.